car, handcuffed. And that's what happened last night.
The police kicked in the door, shot him twice in the chest, and died. Before you knew it, we had 500 families. We had over 100 volunteers calling us. We were on the phone constantly.
And I can't get it. And I got one police department telling me they don't know who's in charge. I got another police department here. Everybody's got a gun, and nobody knows who's in charge. Did anybody figure out who's in charge yet? Is there anybody in charge here? Any police officer in charge? Are you in charge? I can't find anybody in charge. That's the problem.
Hi, everybody. It is Wednesday, and this is NJRR Live. I'm Brian Powers. I'm usually the host, but tonight I'm going to be a guest or a sidekick or something. We had a guest cancel at the last minute, and these things happen. But luckily for us here at Revolution Radio, we have like this amazing talent pool, and they're all interesting people to listen to. So if you're on the chat tonight and you want to participate, you can do that. Or you can, text me if you want to hop in. If not, I'm just going to hand it over to our host. And we've got plenty to talk about, honestly. So it's nice that we can actually kind of fill some gaps. Like we were both talking before the show. Like we talked to a lot of interesting people. The most common thing I hear is I after the shows is I didn't feel like I had enough time. Like from everybody's like you always want more. And tonight we got some extra time. So have at it, Christian. How are you?
Doing okay, Brian. Doing okay tonight. Glad to be here again tonight. And I have to say, so far, I think my favorite interview, and not to take down any views from anyone so far, is the interview we did with Lester and Dylan Chambers. That was a fun interview. That was a fun interview. I mean, and just talk about more time. I could have sat there and listened to Lester and Dylan just talk for another hour or two or three. That was a lot of fun. And for those of you that haven't seen it, check out the IDAVOX report. I believe that was our first official, or first or second official episode, and it was interviewing Lester Chambers of the Chambers Brothers and his son Dylan. So
Dylan and Lester Chambers.
Dylan and Lester Chambers. Check it out, folks. It was a good one. But it's there's never a dull moment here. There's always something to talk about. So a couple things I wanted to talk about. One was the shootings last week in Atlanta. And I also have some notes I wanted to go over from Monday's program on political cults. Just some anecdotes I could throw out, a couple little factoids, and maybe some little personal experiences that I've had. How's that sound, Brian?
Sure. Let's what would you like to talk about first? I mean, I've been kind of like absorbed in other stuff this week, because just life and it was supposed to be a week off, so I didn't really too much. I know, of course, about the Atlanta shootings, and then there was another shooting in Colorado, and it seems, and I guess. I don't know if I expressed this fear the other night on the air, whether I did it privately, but, I guess my fear is this is people just coming out of hibernation after being locked down with vaccinations and, included with the people going out back to work and back to school will be people who shoot people. Yeah. And, and given the kind of mental health effects of quarantine, I am nervous as to the amount of people that are about to be unleashed onto the world whom don't know how to interact with society anymore. At what level? I mean, you'd be a little grumpy and ornery and hard to get along with. That's one thing. But to wonder people who were on the edge, going into this stuff, people who had issues or people who experienced death in the family or injuries because of COVID, all those things put together have a dramatic impact on somebody's mental health.
Yeah.
And this is what are we going to see here in the next couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, it's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think the most heartbreaking part for me is the fact that everyone is so kind of nonchalant about it, like, oh, back to normal. Mass shootings. People are
It
getting
is.
killed in grocery stores. People are getting killed, at work at a spa. So I mean, it's an indictment of our system that we are looking at just these grotesque murders as something. They're part of our normal, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that we didn't have mass shootings for a year, that was outside of the norm. That was the exception to the rule. So I guess this is our system fixing itself. And I have to say, whether it's a white guy from Atlanta or what seems to be an Arab guy in Colorado, I think the problem has to do just with violence in general, men being trained to be violent. I had that really good interview with Sam Yang from Southpaw, and we talk about one of the bridges between American and Brazilian culture is martial arts culture, right? And it's not always the healthiest martial art culture. It tends to be very nationalistic, very right-wing, very close-minded. And unfortunately, it's not always accommodating to people who have problems, people who may have mental illness, people who may be dealing with anxiety or alienation. Martial arts is good, but you have to go to the right school. Yeah. I mean, there's too many people in this country that tie their masculinity to gun ownership. Now, I mean, we've talked about it. I'm not against getting rid of guns, right? I do believe in some gun control. I think, if a guy,
you're not against people having guns.
I'm not against people having guns. I mean, but if somebody has a history of violence, if somebody just got out of prison last week, I'm not saying we should, allow them to have an assault rifle or a grenade launcher or something like that. I am in favor of background checks, and I'm very much aware of the arguments. That attacks on the right will also mean attacks on the left, and I'm very much aware that anarchists, Marxist-Leninists, and a lot of people on the left are in favor of gun ownership. That is singularly almost a liberal issue, and I think a lot of my students have this. When I'm trying to explain to them, and I said I have these lessons on ideology, that I try to explain to them that the left and liberals are not the same thing. And one of the ways you can tell the difference is the issue of gun control or gun ownership. So if you look at Joe Biden is talking about he's in favor of an assault weapon ban. A lot of people are in favor of that, whereas a lot of our Marxist-Leninist friends or anarchist friends are preparing for the revolution, so they don't necessarily believe in gun control. There's an argument to be made about should the state have a monopoly on violence, and I think there is some justification for that. I don't want Joe Blow owning a tank, but there's definitely a conversation there, and I think there's a conversation we should have about it. A conversation we should have about it in the future.
I just think it's a poorly debated issue, as many issues are in this country. And to say, that I'm pro-gun, I think is correct. I've been a gun owner, and I've come from a family and a history of some gun culture in it, and so I understand where they come from. And one of the things never debated, I'm sorry, on the political stage, because I think that the gun debate is always centered, as all debates are, in Washington D.C. Or in more liberal kind of urban and populated centers where gun violence is highlighted. Of course, these are we're talking about African American and other traditionally marginalized groups, whereas in white culture, gun culture is celebrated, right?
Yeah.
So white people are basically allowed to have as many guns as they want. So I think when we talk about gun control, and particularly the type of gun control that liberals espouse, is focused on disarming an oppressed population, which is troublesome. And it's also, this idea that in rural poor neighborhoods, which we traditionally think of as white, but it's not necessarily true. There's plenty of rural poor African American, Native American, indigenous peoples places. The ownership of a firearm is needed to eat. When you're poor and there's a deer in your backyard, you're going to shoot the fucking thing and eat it.
Yeah.
And so I think when we talk about the extremes of taking away guns, in the liberal line of only the military and the police should have guns.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to take their guns away first. Okay. So let's put it that way. Now, I'm not, and in a state, man, in a state where,
shout out
like
to Ty. By the way, shout out to Tyrone. By the way, that's one of my oldest friends.
Yeah, in a state that's so untrustworthy and so violent. And we live in the most, I mean, and we live in the most violent nation in the history of the world. You know, we're the only nation that's dropped atomic bombs on other countries. We have this military industrial complex that we could go on and on about. Yeah. And to say that we should disarm a populace while that military industrial complex remains that strong, I think is poorly thought out and poorly considered. So if we want to disarm our military, I tell you what, the United States military gives up their nukes. You can talk about taking away people's AR-15s.
Yeah, I think the quickest way
to start bargaining here like they bargain with other countries, start bargaining with the American people.
Yeah, I think a good way to get conservatives to favor gun control would be if people of color started arming themselves. So the most famous example would be California under Ronald Reagan. This is in the 60s, 70s, probably the early 70s. At this point, California, very conservative, very much loose gun laws until the Black Panthers started getting guns. And so they started promoting gun ownership in Black communities. And so until they started trailing police officers and educating themselves on the law, then gun control became a statewide priority. So I honestly believe that if people of color start arming and take a more militant, and I'm not even saying that this is the solution, right? But if people of color get more militant and organized and start buying guns, you will see more activity around gun ownership. But it's a conversation that is only being had between conservatives and moderate liberals. There's nobody else you don't want the far right in this conversation, but in terms of the left, they're not really being given access to this conversation. And there's an image a couple of years ago from Austin, Texas. I think they're called the Red Guards. They're Maoists. And there was, I believe it was either a mosque or a synagogue, which was being targeted by white supremacists with guns, right? So you get out of your service at your mosque, your synagogue, or your Black church, and across the street is a bunch of racists with guns. So what the Austin Red Guards did was they would show up at these places with signs, anti-racist signs, slogans showing solidarity, and they would show up and they would protect these people with guns, white people with guns, with hammer and sickle flags and masks, saying, no, we're here to scare the racists away. These people need to, worship in peace. And again, it's just more water thrown on the fire saying, liberals or the left is against God. Well, the left wants you to have your freedom of expression, to have your freedom of religion. It's the right that wants to impose their creepy far right Christian agenda. And I think that is directly linked to the shooting in Atlanta. And what was it? There's
a glorification of the gun culture that I don't think should take place on either side. And the situation you just described to me is one that I'd prefer not to see in which the country that I live. Like I don't really want to be in a country where we're shooting each other on the street to defend people going to worship as they please. I don't like that, regardless of who's holding the guns, even though these may be people I call comrade and we have similar symbols and ideology. I still don't like this idea that that's the kind of place that we live, right?
It shouldn't be that way.
No, it shouldn't be. So, and that's where I bring to like the larger issues and the socioeconomic issues. But when it comes to like strictly gun policy, I just think that we're not having a realistic debate. I think it's a political debate, much like our healthcare debate. It's about what you can get done politically, as opposed to it's just kind of common sense, and this thing that like we need to ban assault weapons. And my question a lot when people say, well, we need to ban assault, I say, well, what is an assault weapon? Like, what do you consider an assault weapon? And very few people who want to ban assault weapons know what an assault weapon is. They think it's a fully automatic or a semi-automatic or no. That's assault weapons are ill-defined, and they're actually not well-defined under the code of law either. So an assault weapon can be characterized from state to state as different, and under federal law is a different type of weapon. So, the idea that when people say just off the bat by saying we need to ban assault weapons, what you're telling me is you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because an assault weapon isn't a thing. It's
loosely defined. If it's loosely defined, we don't know what it is.
Weapon. So tell me you want to ban an AR-15, or tell me you want to ban a caliber of bullet, or tell me you want to ban, hollow points were a thing, cop killing bullets years ago, right? Tell me you want to ban that, and then we can talk about that. But when you tell me you want to ban assault weapons, what you're telling me is you've never studied this issue and you're parroting talking points from, morons, basically. It's covered. I mean,
Exactly.
it's Democrats, and it's political influence and lobbying groups, and nobody knows. And none of them ever fired a gun, never gone out to a trap range. If you've ever been out to shoot skeet, this is one of the funnest things you could ever do in your whole life.
I haven't fired a gun in probably well over 20 years.
Did you ever shoot a shotgun?
Yes, that was the only gun I shot, was a shotgun. I was hunting with my cousin.
Okay.
Or he was hunting and I was with him.
Right.
But I was still underage, so I wasn't allowed to hunt. I was allowed to follow him. And since we were in the middle of nowhere, a swamp, he let me fire it off. But, it was controlled, and he was very good. He was very good, and he was, he controlled the entire situation. But okay, so I'm like a 10-year-old kid, fat little Christian, and the camouflage outfit that he gave me. And he's trying to tell me how to stand. Now, again, this rifle is probably half the size of me at this point, right? So
I hope it was a 20 gauge. I hope he didn't give you a 12 gauge at 10.
I don't know what it was. He
Okay.
We had some wooden block that was just kind of sitting around. So he goes and he puts it on the stump, and it was just he's like, all right, hold it, Christian, good. And then I pulled the trigger, and it was cool, but I didn't know about kickback. So it busts into my shoulder, and I kind of stumble back, and then I look, and it was cool seeing all the all the little rounds on the piece of wood. I think I held on to that for a year. I ended up leaving it in Long Island. That's where this was. But that was the last time I shot a gun.
The shot. That's what the shot.
It was the
shots. Yeah. Shot. That's what it's called.
Yeah. So again, it shows you how much I know about it. But
that's cool.
I mean, I went goose hunting. It was Canada geese with my older cousin Mark, and he took me at least twice. And it was, at the time, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I'd never been around guns or hunting.
White trash bags on the ground?
No. We just dragged them all back to the
There's actually quite a bit of Canadian goose hunting in New Jersey.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and if you go out, you'll see you can go out to where they hunt, and they'll put they use white trash bags. So you stake out a bunch of white trash bags on the ground, and then camo up yourself in the middle of these white trash bags, and you'll just see a dude in a lawn chair with a bunch of camo on with a shotgun and a recording of a goose. You can actually play a recording of. You don't have to call.
Oh, he had the call. He had the actual.
You can call if you want. Yeah, you can call. But there's automated calls that you can hit with your foot, so you don't have to move around a lot, and the speaker system. And I mean, they get really elaborate.
Well, this was 27 years ago, so I'm sure the hunting technology has come a lot far. But I remember it was a Saturday or Sunday, so we carried the geese back to my other aunt and uncle's house, and my cousin hung them up to bleed in the backyard. But by the time I left, it was later that day, so I never actually got to eat the goose meat, which was what it was all about. So one of these days I'll try it.
I never had wild goose meat. I think I've had farm raised goose.
Yeah,
it's always very different. So you can't.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, like I said, I've hunted. I've been in there. I've seen these different cultures and how they deal with guns, and I just feel like we're having a conversation that's kind of wrongheaded, and ultimately, I think it leads to a more militarized police force. I think it leads to a more violent society on the part of the state oppressing the working class. And I think we need to balance our economic and political power as a primary way of reducing violence and saving lives. I'm not ignoring the gun issue by saying that those are the issues we need to address. I think by addressing the minimum wage and healthcare and these other issues, you are more directly addressing the gun issue than by gun control measures.
Yeah, I mean, and
I believe that's
people need services, right? People need services. And like I always say, job training, after school programs, higher education, mental health, and access to affordable, if not free healthcare, right? And when people don't have these things, and like I said, this shooter was going to Crabapple First Baptist Church. If you have mental illness or you're sexually repressed, you need professional help. You don't need to go to your little church in was it Cherokee County to get help. You need to talk to a professional, right? I mean, this church, part of their doctrine is absolutely prohibiting premarital sex. So you have these people that these are guys, these are people with urges right? And it's always men who act on these urges. It's never women are sexually repressed, right? You know, how many women are sexually repressed out there? Like, we really need to have that conversation. And they're not lashing out violently. They're not killing people. They're not shooting people. But with guys become sexually repressed, and all of a sudden they start shooting people. It's
we're not
like that whole conversation needs to be addressed. It's not women.
I mean, that's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is. It is a rabbit hole.
Talking about too without a sisters.
But I mean,
sisters,
like,
help us out. You got to book a guest because
yeah,
I don't.
We need some
really,
sisters to come on and talk. I'm gonna stop it there.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I want to paint a picture. We have this guy, right? He's product of a Southern education, right? So if he's going to one of those public schools they got down there, forget it. On top of that, he's going to a church that is not based in the real world. Like, they're trying to, like, people have urges: eat, sleep, reproduce, right? You're trying to stop premarital sex. You might as well try to stop the dawn, right? So rather than talk to these young people about safe sex or, consent and things like that, it's just don't do it, right? They're stuck in the 1950s. And whether it's, some podunk little church in Georgia, or, high school sex ed up here, if you don't address these things, people are going to be misinformed about it. And that's where we get problems, right? These are not people with, I'm not a clinic. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm an expert, but I don't think this guy was a sex addict. I think this guy was sexually repressed, and he was told he was a sex addict. And rather than find a constructive way of dealing with it, he decided to take that anger, that aggression out on these innocent people. So he's facing 8 murder charges, 4 in Atlanta and 4 in Cherokee County. And for me, the biggest problem is, it's not even that this guy, like this shooter, went to this church, which misinformed him, that this guy obviously has, I'm going to say it, he's obviously racist. He's obviously a sexist. He has these problems. But on top of all that, it's the local police department. What was it? The Cherokee County Sheriff's Office a spokesman who basically said, well, he had a bad day. This is a guy who had a tough day, or whatever the heck the wording was. And again, it's this idea. So you have a bad day, you're going to kill everybody. Everybody has a bad day. It's been a bad year.
I had a lot of bad days, man. And
yeah.
I decided to kill 8 people. I mean,
yeah. And then the same Sheriff's County, was it the spokesman for the Sheriff's County, less than a year ago, allegedly, whenever they say allegedly, it always cracks me up. If they did it, they did it. Let's stop saying allegedly. But anyway, on his Facebook page, he was trying to, I don't know if I have the quote here, but anyway, he was like selling a t-shirt. She says she works in Cherokee County and she concurs. We had a guy, he was, thank you, Laura. He was selling a t-shirt that said the COVID-19 comes from China. Like, it was written out to mimic Trump's pronunciation of blaming the Chinese for the coronavirus. These are the police that we're expecting to address this issue objectively, to take, sexual repression and racism. Like, these police officers are racist themselves, because if it's one cop, it's more than one. Right?
I guess my only question is the guy connected to reality? Is he so ill that he just has no friggin' idea what he's doing at this point? Or was he cognizant and doing it out of some motivation, like you said, racism, sexism, all these other issues, and couple that with the fact that, you can't trust the investigatory body, the police. It's hard to know what the truth really is and what went on, that day. And I guess that's, that's the problem for me. All I know is, this is, 8 people were murdered for no apparent reason. And, that happens, but it happens all the time in this country. And like you said, we talked about it before, it's getting back to normal. It is getting back to normal. I mean, we were pre-pandemic. People were shooting up the friggin' place every couple of weeks, every 2 or 3 weeks, whatever. Here's another one on the news, 10 people here, 8 people there, in a school, in a church, in a mall. I mean, it was very, very common. We've just been pent up. I mean, we are getting back to normal.
There was a period in 2017. So for my class, well, pre-pandemic, one of my assignments is everybody has to do a current event, right? You get in front of the class, you read an article, you present the article to class, you hand me a 2-page paper. This is the current event that I'm doing this week or whatever, right? The problem was, I can't remember, I think it was either 2016 or 2017. It had gotten to the point where there were so many shootings that like all my students wanted to talk about was shootings. And it was like the 3rd or 4th shooting in as many months. And it was like, we can't do this anymore. We can't in my class,
No.
I can't keep asking my students the same questions over and over. And it's like, as a society, it keeps going.
I had multiple conversations with a couple of my children, and I don't talk too much about my family life, but I will tell you, tears were involved in a couple of them. My kids were scared seeing some, and you can't keep them away from kids. Are way smarter than anybody ever wants to give them credit to, and they saw that stuff on the news, and they're on the internet, and they're looking at these the social media feeds and stuff, and they're seeing it, and no, it was really starting to affect them, worrying about going to school. And I didn't like my community's reaction of putting more police back in school and seeing, armed people walk around my school. It didn't make me feel safer. It really didn't. I mean, now I've got another guy with a gun walking around.
Yeah, it's scary. To think only criminals have guns while the real gangsters shoot with vaccines. I don't know what that means.
Oh, Matt, take that. No.
I don't know what that means.
I have no idea. You're in the wrong program. Get
vaccinated. Would say
guy your doctor tells you don't get vaccinated, go get vaccinated. Bill Gates called me and told me you'll be fine.
When was this, Laura? She's saying guy in Atlanta Publix arrested with 5 guns.
You were doing so well with the comments. Where'd that come from?
Get vaccinated, people. There was a history of medical racism and systemic racism in the medical. All of that. Yes. The medical industry is still very racist. Yes. But this is not the 1930s, the 1940s, right? They already tested the vaccine. Just get it, right? Millions of people have gotten it already. Nobody's turning into cows. Nobody's giving off Wi-Fi signals. Nobody's turning into lizard people. Laura, I mean, it's, I remember the fire drill. Now they have the active shooter drills.
I'm having a party under a 5G cell tower, and I'm serving Chinese food. It's going to be awesome.
There we go. All money, all proceeds go to the lizard people. But I mean, like, it's problematic. Like, we have this guy, like, and I'm not going to blame mental illness, but this person, this shooter, and I'm not going to name the name. Oh, so today about the Atlanta Publix. So again, potential for another mass shooting event in Atlanta today, and it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop in this country. But I mean, to talk about the shooter, it's misinformation everywhere, misinformation on the internet, misinformation from our political leaders, and this guy goes to a church expecting the truth, and they're just throwing more nonsense onto the fire for him. I mean, it's. And I don't want to victimize the shooter because he is a predator and he murdered all those people. But it's the same thing happening. And for this, like, and the church cut the guy loose. Like they wash their hands of him, and it's a smart thing to do. But it's like, I mean, I don't know what to say. I just, when we talk about evangelicals, white evangelicals, 81% of them voted for Donald Trump. So these people who claim morality voted for the most immoral president in our lifetimes. Right. So for them, racism doesn't matter. Sexism doesn't matter. All that matters is he promised them political power. And for them, political power and the ability or the promise to enact their agenda is more important than him being a hypocrite. It's gotten to the point where if somebody says they're an evangelical, I don't know how to take that. Well, what does that mean? Like, did you vote for the groper? Did you vote for the person who obviously says like racist things? I mean, I was reading a Time article. I put it in the comments here if Leah wants to post it out there. It says 70%, according to Time magazine, 70% of men claiming to be, white Southern evangelicals, 70% hide their porn use. Right? So, they're
well, doesn't everybody hide their porn use?
Yes, but it's like,
I mean, I don't post it when I'm going on.
But for this community, sexual impropriety is worse than being racist. It's worse than being sexist, right? Being outside the norm sexually for these people, that's what's considered worse, right? I mean, think of like, huh? Unless the president does it, and he makes promises to enact their agenda. See, that was the voice of an angel jumping in to help me.
Nixon made that rule.
Nixon. But yeah, I mean, it's don't buy into the sex addiction. Don't buy into anybody trying to blame the mentally ill. I mean, because that's another cop out. Like, I had a meeting at work yesterday with the director of disabilities, and he said 90% of people we call disabled have what's called invisible disabilities. right? So when you see somebody with a physical disability, that's only 10% of disabled people, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking people with learning disabilities, people with serious mental health issues, and to just write them all off as deranged, or they could possibly, just go postal one day and start shooting people. It's sloppy, and politicians do it. It's almost criminal. I have no faith in Atlanta, Cherokee County to address this issue. And again, of course, they rush to say it's anything other than racism. It's a million things, but it definitely was not a hate crime. He didn't go to like a strip club. He didn't go to Victoria's Secret. He went to the spas. I don't want to say massage parlor. He went to the spas with predominantly Asian people, and those are the people that he killed. Right? He could have gone into Victoria's Secret.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, and I really don't understand why we're seeing police give their opinion or their thoughts or anything. Now, I come from some background where investigations are a part of the job, and an investigation isn't about your opinion. An investigation isn't about what kind of charges are going to be brought. An investigation isn't about an outcome. An investigation is an uncovering of factual data. So a police officer's press conference should be something to the effect of a male was captured after having fired so many shots and was brought into the precinct at this time in handcuffs and is under.
Just the facts, man.
It really shouldn't be, well, he had a bad day and shut the fuck up. Nobody gives a shit.
Yeah. Why are we taking this guy at his word, too?
And then you produce a thing with papers and letters and pictures and shit in it, and you give it to somebody smarter than a pig, and they figure out what you're going to do with the whether there's charges, right? And listen, it doesn't go off to much smarter hands after that. I'm just saying, like, the whole idea that the cops are giving their opinions about an investigation, one that's underway, and two, that their opinion shouldn't even be a part of it. It should be an investigatory findings, and they really should. And the fact that police go about their jobs in such in a political manner tells you a lot about the police force. And from a lot of experience I think we think of police as enforcers of, and then they enforce the state, they enforce private property or whatever. No, police are just fucked up human beings running around with guns and handcuffs who pretty much get away with whatever they want. And if they're halfway decent, they don't shoot your dog when they show up. There's not this, they're not robots, right? And they make decisions based on the same things that everybody else makes decisions based on. Yeah. Your emotional state of the time, whether you had a bad day, what information you have in your hand at the time. There's not this kind of rudimentary professionalism. And it's gotten, and we talked about Giuliani, right? We talked about Giuliani on the Idavox report. We went on and on about this lunatic and how you just rile up racism and rile up the police and get all this violence, injected into the system and used it for political gain. Well, that's because the police just didn't act like professionals, and they rarely do. And until we start getting, rid of the police and we abolish this police and come up with a way of, organizing a society in which the police don't have political power, and police unions are another big part of that. I talk about unions all day.
Yeah.
But while the police are not, even as most communists and socialists would describe them, as enforcers of the state, the police are policymakers. The police are a political force. The police lobby. The police, shape communities by the way they enforce policy. Rather than, they don't just enforce policy, they selectively enforce policy. How they enforce policy in a white neighborhood versus a Chinese neighborhood versus a Puerto Rican neighborhood versus a black neighborhood shapes that community.
Strong unions too.
They shouldn't
make
have
or break
that
politicians.
They just shouldn't. It's not a good society that way.
Yeah, I mean it's one group that is almost like, despite the criticism they get, there's very little. There's so many people out there on the left, they do this too, who equate like Twitter feedback to like actual feedback, right? People criticizing you on Twitter, police, politicians, whoever, is not the same as people in power using institutional power to enact change, right? So 800 people on Twitter say, ACAB, or, defund the police, or okay, whatever. It could be a million people. It could be, they're just people. They're just people talking, right? But what politicians are actually criticizing police? There's a handful of them. They're out there doing it, but it's a tiny minority that's doing it. Joe Biden is not criticizing the police, right? Barack Obama was not going to criticize the police. I mean, if you listen to right-wing media, he's a second coming of Malcolm X. But yeah, it's almost as
why,
an
Professor?
industry, they're almost above criticism in this country, and we have more than enough conservative liberal politicians.
I wanted to ask you. I guess I gotta switch into interviewer mode here and ask you why, in your political estimation, what are the major? I know there's a lot of reasons, but can you give me some of the major factors as to why, you don't hear any party politicians really get too hard on the police? I mean, there's some progressives out there, and I'll give some credit to some progressive Democrats that will talk about defunding the police, that will talk about and talk, and they'll talk and they'll talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. It's nice to hear that rhetoric, but very rarely do you see them advance policy to, defund the police. Or we have seen some examples of that, but that aside, for the majority of it. So why on the scale, what are the forces keeping Joe Biden from saying, no, we need to defund police departments and start?
Well, I mean, police have political power. Police have a lot of political power. Like you said, they have unions. Politicians won't cross them. And I think the main reason is that for an overwhelming majority of Americans, when they think police officers, they think sitcoms. They think of, the police officer who's the basketball coach, and he might be your basketball coach, your little league coach, or your friend's dad, or the guy up the road. But in another community, he's not that.
Yeah.
And it's, if you are a politician and you're going to criticize the police, they're going to come after you. They're going to criticize you too. Republican politicians will criticize you because no Republicans are going to criticize police. We don't even see them criticizing the Capitol rioters because they murdered police. So we see them. They don't even have the guts to do it. Right. So they're trying to play this balance game. And then liberals, they're the Bud Light. So they're busy trying to be conservatives anyway. So they're not going to do it. So unfortunately, it winds up being the left wingers, anti-capitalists, people of color, and a handful of progressive politicians that end up criticizing the police. But again, for the overwhelming majority of this country, they think it's a cartoon show. They think they're on a sitcom and all the police are good people. And you know what? The cop, personally, individually, might be a good person. But when they're a mass of individuals beating people up, then it's a different issue. Look at the anti-police brutality protests this summer, and then how police reacted. The conversation is over, right? Police are violent. They overreact. They did it on camera at an anti-police brutality march. So, at this point, it's just people sticking their head in the sand. But unfortunately, as I said on Monday, people get to choose their own reality, right? So you get to live in a reality where all the cops are good and black people and Puerto Ricans or whoever are just whining, and being gay or trans is a choice. And, this is why we're at where we're at.
So alternative realities, we had some conversation Monday with Dr. Letitia Sampson, and the podcast will be out this weekend. Sorry for the delay on that.
It's a goodie, folks.
But it really came out great. And if you all want to check it out, it is up on YouTube and stuff. And we'll get the finished podcast out to our podcast listeners. And just for those of you that don't know, Revolution Radio goes on the air on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Live streaming on YouTube, on Facebook, on what else? Twitch, Twitter, and some other stuff. And then we take that live stream and we turn it into a podcast, and that goes out on Spotify and iTunes and Google Play and everything else out there podcasts. No, I can hear you there. I see you. All right.
I'm here. I'm coming in and out.
Oh, okay. All right. So I've been rambling on. I'm just doing a little breaking commercial here, so you're good. Okay. Thanks, Warren. Thank you for being on the YouTube. Thanks everybody for checking out. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us, give us some stars and stuff on the podcast rankings and all that. That kind of stuff helps. And to be honest with you, like if you're going to be in the YouTube gang, I like that. We have a YouTube gang now. If you're going to be in the YouTube gang, we could appreciate YouTube gang members. Please, go out there, share. recruit and grow the cause, man. We appreciate your support. That's all I got. So and one of those things we brought together. So rather than just coming on the air this week, Tuesday and Wednesday, because of our sponsors, the Coffee House and Great Joy Counseling, we came on for a special episode Monday to talk about the American political cult, which I know, you've been into conspiracy theory, so I know this is one area of conspiracy theory for you. So I was right in your wheelhouse, and of course, Dr. Sampson is a doctor of psychology. So
she was great.
To figure out what was going on. Thank you, Laura. By the way, thank you, Laura, for teaching and being there for our.
Thank you, Laura.
So. It was a really great episode, but like I said at the beginning of the show, we just never have enough time. So, given we have a little few minutes, I mean, I'd love to hear, on retrospect, I did listen through it one more time after we had talked, and getting ready to edit for it. And I have a few, afterthoughts, but I'd like to hear, what'd you think of what didn't you get in, I guess?
I think it was more of the specifics. Like I think I definitely got across that there's some organizations out there that we would call weird or odd or strange or show cult-like behavior. But I think I wanted to kind of get into it a little bit just to show you like what we're dealing with these people. So for instance, like with LaRouche, I mean, as Americans, we see a guy on TV, he's running for president. He seems to have, some money, some following, some kind of, position. So you tend to think, all right, this person's sane. They're running for president. Well, we don't know that. We know that's not the case now. But I mean, let me just read this. And this is directly from Rational Wiki, which if you want, to explore conspiracy theories, pseudosciences, and just bad ideas in general, but with the tongue-in-cheek kind of attitude, check out Rational Wiki. It's like Wikipedia, but it's like a skeptic version of Wikipedia. And it's, what is it they have here? It says, the underlying theme used as the basis for nearly all of LaRouche's actions stems from the conspiracy theory that the British royal monarchy still rules the British Empire, right? So World War II, the British Empire dissolving and becoming the Commonwealth never happened. The British us forcing the British to get access to their markets, that never happened. The British are still pulling the strings. And, the United States and the American presidents are really just slaves to England. Anytime there's been an attack on a president, it was the British. And this is my favorite. Here we go. LaRouche also thought that rock and roll, especially the Beatles, were a British intelligence plot to lead us into a new cultural dark age, right? And that only a certain type of classical music is what was acceptable. So this guy was like right on the train to Crazyville. What it says, and only classical music played in C 256 hertz, Verdi tuning, can bring about the new political and cultural renaissance. And that Harry Potter and Pokemon are cults. Huh?
Can I listen to Yo-Yo Ma?
But Yo-Yo Ma is cool. Actually, last week...
Is he within 256 hertz?
I don't remember. He made the news last week because he went to get his shot and he brought his cello. So he sat there and played his cello in the waiting area for a bunch of people. So they got an impromptu Yo-Yo Ma concert. So
I need a larger research department. Leah, find out if Yo-Yo Ma is in 256 hertz.
Get that cello
what
playing.
Ridiculous. I mean, like they and people, but that's, I mean, that it's so cults are ridiculous, except to the people that are in them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing.
Really
it's
just this weirdest fucking thing in the whole world, man.
Yeah, I mean, even like, and I hesitate to call Trumpers cult-like, but if we're going to say that these organizations are cult-like, Trumpers show that too, right? They show the exact same sign. So again, 81% of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump. You were willing to sell out everything you claim to stand for Donald Trump, right? Who was it? Was it Pat Robertson who said he had a dream and saw Donald Trump in heaven sitting at the right hand of God? Jesus Christ is supposed to sit at the right hand of God. So these are people saying that Donald Trump is literally a Christ figure, right? So we want to make fun of LaRoucheites. We want to make fun of, all these organizations, but we have almost a third of this country that's willing to support a man that will cultivate a cult. Donald Trump wants it because those people are giving him money.
Well, I mean, that's, the cult lead, the cult is about what the cult leader wants. I mean, and one of the things that I think, we didn't get to discuss too much, in the kind of the trademarks and aspects of a cult is the fact that the cult leader is never held to the same doctrine as the cult followers. So, and you see this in particularly, you know, twisted situations like Jim Jones and that stuff, where, you know, husbands are forced to give their wives to the cult leader. However, the husbands are not, you know, taking that same privilege, and it's not, you know, it's one big orgy for the cult leader, and everybody else kind of feeds that need. So, you know, that kind of the idea that, you know, and when you talk about other religions, at least what they teach, is that they should be all held to that same doctrine, right? That priests, understandably, they're not, and I could get into problems with the Catholic Church and all that, but that's not what we're here for today. I'm just saying, in theory, right? In not in practice, but in theory, they're in an organization which is under one doctrine, and everybody in that organization is held to that doctrine. In a cult, the cult leader does whatever the hell he wants or she wants. And everybody else is held to an ever-changing doctrine that is put out by them. And we didn't. So, you know, I think, you know, getting into those kind of and also keeping in mind that having that special and talking about this wasn't specifically designed maybe to look at cults, but also to look at toxic atmospheres in organizations and cultures in organizations, because I could certainly make the argument that any organization I've ever been a part of is a cult because it has some of these characteristics to it. A bad boss, for instance,
authoritarian.
Right? A bad boss runs an office like a cult.
Yeah,
right.
Almost all jobs, like unless you work at even co-ops, right? They're democratic, but there's still a boss. There's still somebody in charge, right? So, but like most of us, we have a regular 9-to-5 job. If you work in anywhere, they're inherently authoritarian. They're undemocratic, right? And I've been in more than enough places where, you know, a leader is making just a bad decision, and people just go along with it, and it's like, this is
every job I've ever been at. I mean, every job I've ever been at. I mean, I've personally carried out bad decisions because it's what they paid me to do that day. I mean, honestly, you know, honestly, so what you do, and as far as being a capitalist, I always thought of being called a capitalist tool was just fine by me, because that's what I felt like when I was working for a large
Isn't everybody?
I was a tool. I came into work that day and I had to strip myself down of any belief or principle or love of anything that I had. And I had to become the same as a screwdriver or a drill or a hammer and do what I was told to do that day by my master, right? By whoever had me in their hand that day. And that, you know, it was the boss. And that was the way to get through the day, right? Is to do these things that I didn't really care all that much about and get personal reward for, you know. And then, you know, I moved on to careers where I had, you know, more personal gratification for, and it felt a lot different, felt a lot better too, you know what I mean? But that's what you have to, you know, you have to kind of take that mindset. And so when you think about the way a cult does it, they brainwash you, right? They take your personality away. They change you into somebody else. We talked about this, right? Yeah. So what was I doing at work? I was becoming somebody else. I was taking my own personality away. And, you know, it's kind of odd to think that as a human being, you can just turn that on and off 8 hours a day, you know, to fuck your whole mind up for 8 hours a day and then just go back to being Brian after that.
People have totally different lives. I'm sure I could ask, you know, anybody here, how many of you have like had a job and the boss is a complete asshole, right? But somebody swears to you that, oh, that's all of us, right? And somebody swears, but outside the job, he's such a cool guy. I don't care how he is outside the job. I'm spending 8 hours a day with him here. Right. So it's just like there's always those like they're a different person at work. I'm Christian Perez all the time on the show with my wife, you know, at work. I'm Christian Perez. What you see is what you get. And it's just, I don't know. Some people are just willing to, you know, drink the Kool-Aid, as they say, and follow along and do so uncritically. And some of us have to, right? We're chained to our jobs. But I mean, just because you're going along with the program doesn't mean you have to think it.
I still have a switch. I still have a switch that goes on and off a little bit when I think that I'm in a, you know, when I'm in a more professional atmosphere as opposed to a social. I think we all do. I mean, we all. I mean,
but that's not the same thing.
Natural, but I think mine is a little more. you know what it was? It's compartmentalization. It's a psychiatric. You know, when you go to therapy and stuff, they talk about compartmentalizing and trying to, you know, live one part of your life. Just like I was saying, you know, cut off. And I did do that. And once you start to do that psychologically, you can't really undo it. And there's a whole, you know, from my work history and experience, which is a little eclectic. I mean, I kind of hopped around, you know, from job to job. And in my years I was in the military, I was a florist. I've had like 30 or 40 jobs, and you know, that's kind of common nowadays. But you know, I just think all in told, every experience I have has been very, very similar. And so that's my makeup when it comes to thinking about work, and my mentality when it comes to work is shaped by those experiences, and having so many bad bosses, and having one boss in particular that really fucked my head up. You know, it's going forward. I have to take all those experiences with me and bring them to new jobs where I'm trying to maybe, you know, turn the page and get a better career going, and not have a bad experience, and maybe finish up and retire someday. You know, I mean, you know, but you have to, you know, I still have that kind of switch in my head when I go to work. I can't be Brian, because, you know, I have to do
well. Yeah, absolutely. But like, even as Warren says here, he says, I hate people who act two different ways depending on the environment. I understand code switching, but some people act completely different. Like, obviously, yes, if you're at the job, I 100% expect you to be professional, right? I was a manager. I expect everyone to be professional, but professional is a big window. You know, being a lackey is not the same thing as being as being professional. I mean, being courteous, being respectful, being helpful, that's good customer service, right? Yeah. But again, if your boss is exploiting you, don't act like he's not. Like, I'm just saying, like, yeah, like we all got to do that.
I was a cable TV installer. I mean, you didn't want me, you know, I might show up on your porch one day with a joint hanging out of my mouth and an open can of beer out of a 6-pack. You know, I'm not going to show up to install your cable TV like that. Although it would be funny, and I could do it just fine. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Did you give yourself free cable? Did you give yourself all the hookups?
Oh, I was Verizon. They had fiber optics.
Oh, no, let's forget it. Yeah, I'm talking. I mean, like old days, back in the old days.
In an apartment, though, I gave a guy $50 to take the little. Back in the old school days, all I had to do was take the little filter off. It's all digitalized.
Yeah, it's different now.
So you got to get to it. But then I had the little Steely box where you could watch wrestling for free. So I was into WWF because I had the pay-per-views once a month for like.
Oh my God, that was me for 4 years. I think it was in the late 90s when wrestling took off, and UFC and mixed martial arts and all these big movies. My cousin, I'm not going to say which cousin, I got a lot. He comes to my father one day and he goes, "Uncle Hector, I want to show you something." He's like, "What is it, buddy?" And he opens up his trunk, and he had like 20 of those magic boxes. And he goes,
he was
selling them. And he's like, "Here, Uncle Hector." And then he sets it up. I had wrestling. I had pay-per-view. I had all the movies. I had this is in high school when it was like really, it was so cool at the time. Channel? Maybe. Yeah. But I'm 16, 17 years old, but it was it was so cool. And then obviously the the technology changed and it started to fade away, but man, it was good while it lasted. I taped so many movies. Most of the movies I have taped are because it was just like, oh, Star Wars, record, the new Wesley Snipes movie, record, wrestling, everything, all the wrestling.
Oh man. I was, so I think I had a black box when I was in San Diego. Oh, so nice. Tyson Holyfield, where he bit his ear off.
I remember that fight. I saw that Long Island. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we saw all the pay-per-views, and I was really into.
I think my uncle was stealing cable there too. My cousin hit up everybody's house. Everybody was stealing cable.
It's harder to steal these. I'm sure you can still do it, but like now because of fiber optics and digital stuff, I mean, there's still stuff out there. I'm sure there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
And having worked for a large telecommunications company, I'm just saying, do your best.
Wasn't that an episode of The Simpsons where the guy stole cable and he hands Homer a pamphlet and it's like, so you decided to steal cable? And it's like, stealing cable is wrong, false. It's a big faceless corporation, so it's okay to steal from them. And the guy, the cable guy was like breaking into people's houses. It was like, all right, we got to get rid of the free cable. Back when The Simpsons was good. Don't get me started on New Simpsons. That's a whole episode right there.
I thought we were talking about cults. Well, it is almost 9 o'clock though. We made it.
Yeah, I think we made it through the show, so I think we did good.
It was fun. I had a great time, man. Listen,
It's always fun chatting, Brian.
It was fun. Just so my audience knows. I was saying I want to thank my audience, and it was a busy week. We did 3 nights this week. We usually only do 2, but I want to thank Christian, of course, and Leah in the background, and everybody that pulled together and put 3 shows together this week. Just there's really, we have minimal budget here, minimal staff. Your support, your donations, www.njrevolutionradio.com is so important. Because
everyone remembers the box.
Yeah, man, 3 shows a week is nothing if you got a big budget, but we got a small budget, so we're all burnt the hell out, and we're gonna take next week off. But we're gonna, we gotta do every few weeks. We're gonna take next week off. I'll play a repeat or something for you, and we'll be back in April. But man, that's whoo.
Donate, folks. Please donate. You can see the link there, New Jersey, njrevolutionradio.com/donate. Please give. If you can, give $5 and tell 5 people about the show. If you can give $5 or $10 and tell 10 people about the show, that'd be great. Let people know there's ways you can help without just giving money. Share our stuff on social media. Share our videos. Tell your friends. Let people know that there's a project that's trying, that we got this project off the ground. We're trying to make it work. And, shout out to everyone in the chat. Warren, my boy Tyrone, going way back. He knows the times with he was there with the Magic Box. Tyrone was sitting there with me. Matt talking about the Georgia Guidestones. Warren, thank you. Laura, thank you. We got cool fans. We got our fans. We want to make this interactive. So jump on in.
That's the music, and they can join the editorial board. If you
join the editorial board.
There's all kinds of ways. Revolution Radio ain't just a podcast, ain't just a live stream. It's an organizing tool, and if you want to find out more, again, visit us. Website is www.njrevolutionradio.com. Christian, thanks a lot, man. I can't believe all the work we did this week, but we got through it.
Nonstop, never stops.
You did a great job. Everybody did. We'll see you in a couple weeks. The police can... I got to do it right. Hold on. I'm going to cut that out. This is Brian Powers, and I will remind everybody that the police can quit their jobs. Good night.
Thrown against the car, handcuffed, and that's what happened last night.
The police kicked in the door, shot him twice in the chest, and died.
Before you knew it, we had 500 families. We had over 100 volunteers calling us. We were on the phone constantly.
And I can't get, and I got one police department telling me they don't know who's in charge. I got another police department here. Everybody's got a gun, and nobody knows who's in charge. Can anybody figure out who's in charge yet? Is there anybody in charge here? Any police officer in charge? Are you in charge? I can't find anybody in charge. That's the problem.